Find the bad John Coltrane record. It does not exist.
It was a vortex of possibilities.
And we were there for a reason, which was to create beautiful music.
Shut the lights out and then just wait to be transcended.
It was a record that made me understand the possibility of music.
Blew my mind when I first heard it.
I Love Supreme is a record that I probably have listened to, honestly, probably more than any other record.
That really is one of the pinnacles of John Coltrane's recorded body of work.
Elvin is a force to be reckoned with.
If you've ever listened to John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, you know this isn't just another jazz record.
One of the greatest jazz records of all time, yeah.
It's Coltrane's spiritual declaration, a 33-minute journey that changed music forever.
It doesn't matter what religion or what ideology you believe. His sound is the sound of light and the sound of love.
And while Coltrane's saxophone and vision are at the forefront, none of it would have been possible without Elvin behind the drums.
Elvin might be considered a rebel. I could never really accept the standard form.
His performance on this 4-part suite isn't just about timekeeping, it's about channeling energy, texture, and spirit through the drums. Join us as we dive into the genius of A Love Supreme.
John Coltrane has set aside some time and he secludes himself above the garage in his house to put together what he sees as a suite.
Recorded in a single session on December 9th, 1964, A Love Supreme was Coltrane's musical prayer, an offering of thanks for a spiritual awakening he experienced. He once said, "During the year 1957, I experienced by the grace of God a spiritual awakening, which was to lead me to a richer, fuller, more productive life." This would be his way of giving thanks after battling his demons of addiction over the years.
Miles Davis famously wrote in his autobiography he would come to the gig in clothes that looked like he'd slept in them.
John Coltrane's fired. He's never been higher in his career, and so the drop down is long and hard. And so here's John Coltrane at a pivotal point of his life. He's got to make a decision.
But it took a while for the vision to come together and find the right musicians. After getting out of military service, Elvin Jones was just starting to make a name for himself.
When I got out of the service, I got into Billy Mitchell's band, and that became quite famous at the Bluebird Inn. We stayed there for about 3 years.
Now, it wasn't long before he landed his first major gig with Charles Mingus.
He offered me the position of playing with Bud Powell, so that we became the Bud Powell Trio with Charlie Mingus and myself.
And around this time, Elvin first met John Coltrane.
My knowledge of Coltrane was from his playing with Miles Davis. At one point, Miles asked me to substitute for Philly Joe Jones, so I met John Coltrane. I'd never heard anybody play saxophone like that.
The chemistry of the John Coltrane Quartet, which was McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on bass, and Elvin Jones on drums, was unmatched. They rarely spoke in the studio and even recorded the A Love Supreme record in near darkness. Each movement of the suite tells part of the story: Acknowledgement, Resolution, Pursuance, and Psalm. But before we look deeper into Elvin's drumming, let's look at the gear that made it all possible. When we think about A Love Supreme, we often jump straight to the spiritual depth of the music, but it's worth remembering how much Elvin's sound was shaped by the tools he had at hand at that time. His drum kit on this record was pretty minimal, which makes the power he got out of it even more impressive. He was using a Gretsch round badge progressive jazz kit in white satin flame, and it had an 18 by 14 inch bass drum, a 12 by 8 rack tom, and a 14 by 14 floor tom. He also had a matching 14 by 5.5 snare on the kit. He also had a full set of K Zildjian cymbals, which were dark, complex, and dynamic, and they were perfect for the rolling waves of sound that Elvin was known for, and we hear right at the beginning of the record. And then there's the percussion section. So Elvin had a gong to his left, which you hear right at the beginning of the record, and he had a timpani to his right, which we hear on Psalm. Now for this video, we've tried to get as close as possible to Elvin's setup. We used my Gretsch round badge progressive jazz kit from the early 60s with a 20-inch bass drum, 12 and 14-inch toms, and a 14 by 5.5 Dixieland snare. We've also got Istanbul AGOP 30th anniversary cymbals, a 14-inch pair of medium hats, and a 20 and 22-inch ride, both with 6 rivets. All the Gretsch hardware is era correct, and we've also used Evans calf tone heads for a more vintage sound, and even an original 60s drum head on the snare drum. So moving ahead to the 90s, Elvin actually played a Yamaha Maple kit when he was with the Jazz Machine, and you could buy that kit actually right now on Reverb for $39,000, or you can enter the Drumeo giveaway we have right now, where we're giving away a full set of Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple drums, which are the modern version of that kit that Elvin had We've also got a full set of Paiste cymbals, a set of hardware. The giveaway is open now until November 21st. All the details are at drumeo.com/win. You just enter your email, and if you win, we'll ship it to you anywhere in the world. So good luck to all of you, and let's get back to the video. The album starts with Elvin striking the gong, and I always loved how Ravi Coltrane explained this intro. It's the signal of something different. You don't hear that instrument anywhere else on any other John Coltrane recording. He never had one on a gig before. Elvin enters almost like a whisper with the riveted cymbals shimmering, and they almost sound more like waves than timekeeping. Now, the foundation of this entire movement is Jimmy Garrison's bass line. Over top of that bass line, Elvin comes in with a quarter note ride cymbal groove that incorporates both the toms and a cross stick on the offbeats. Notice how Elvin's not just mirroring the bass line, he's playing around it, emphasizing the offbeats. This gives the bass line a sense of forward motion instead of just feeling the same all the way through. Around the 1 minute mark, Elvin's groove starts to change and it starts to sound more urgent. A lot of that has to do with the placement of the cross sticks and the 16th note ride pattern he introduces. Throughout the first movement, Elvin's improvising with this Latin feel, using different ride cymbal variations and incorporating the toms and bass drum in different ways. We're going to look at 4 variations of the main groove, starting with 2 tom variations. In the first example, we've got a syncopated ride pattern, we've got a left-hand orchestration between all 3 drums, and we're ending this one with a single floor tom hit at the end of beat 4. Example 2 is very similar, except we're adding in 1 bass drum on the ah of beat 3 and 2 16th note triplets on the floor tom at the end of the groove. Not long after, Elvin introduces the Afro-Cuban Mozambique ride pattern and even starts to add in more of the toms. As the improvisation unfolds, Elvin starts to shape the dynamics with tom rolls for added texture and cymbal crashes. Starting at around 4 minutes and 15 seconds, it's almost like he's painting with sound here and responding to Coltrane's saxophone lines. So I remember hearing this record for the very first time and just being completely mesmerized by what Elvin was playing. But it was pretty challenging to figure out where to start, what groove should I start with, how do I put all the pieces together. And that's why I wanted to film a full breakdown of Acknowledgement for all of you, so you actually have a place to start and you can start learning how to play these Elvin Jones grooves. You and I will practice a bunch of these grooves together. We're going to start really slow, build up to album tempo, and ultimately the goal is that you can actually start jamming along with the recording. We've done the same thing with our Genius of Chop Suey, Stairway to Heaven, Tom Sawyer, and Numa episodes, and tons of drummers are learning how to play these iconic songs behind their own kit. If you want to check these lessons out, they're all available for free over on Musora, and you can click the link down in the description. As we get towards the end of part 1, Coltrane's actually playing the main lick on the saxophone in all 12 possible keys, and that's really just embodying the album's central concept.
Coltrane was definitely someone who was inspired by the concept of the infinite and imagining how science and music and math all worked together and that there was some kind of universal truth.
As the famous 4-note chant, A Love Supreme, comes in, you'll notice how Elvin starts to pull back and forth dynamically. Throughout Acknowledgement, you'll notice that the bass and piano are suggesting a pretty standard quarter note pulse, but at the same time, Elvin's playing some double time patterns on the ride and really diving into his Afro-Caribbean influences. I used to listen to Javier Cugat's band a lot because they were on the radio and in them movies. And of course, Cole Porter wrote a lot of compositions that implied Latin rhythms. It is not always synchronized, so that gives it a certain movement that makes it more fluid. When I applied it, I opted for the fluidity rather than the static portion of the rhythms. And by the 7-minute mark, this fluidity comes into focus as he starts morphing between the intro groove with quarter notes on the ride cymbal and the Mozambique groove.
The second piece on there is the one that touches me. Takes me to heaven, where I want to be when I leave here.
When we move into resolution, the energy rises and we get to hear some of Elvin's incredible swing playing. Notice how Elvin's using lots of different comping ideas between the bass drum and the snare drum in this first section, and it really supports the melody perfectly. In Lewis Porter's John Coltrane book, we read that McCoy Tyner explained it like this. Coltrane flexed and stretched the music, and Elvin reflected that. He gave us the freedom to do that. When McCoy takes over with the piano solo, Elvin starts to thin things out, but the intensity seems to stay. There's a lot of articulation on the ride cymbal, and we really start to hear the hi-hats speak at this part. The end of McCoy's solo is one of my favorite parts of Resolution, and at this part, Elvin starts to play over the bar line with these 3-beat phrases on the ride, while he's comping and keeping things going with the other limbs. As Coltrane comes back in, Elvin ramps up the energy, there's more snare drum comping, and there's some more bombs that happen on the bass drum.
I'm very lucky. I work with very fine musicians. They are very inventive. I don't have to tell anybody what to do. We have a great confidence in one another. That's essential.
When we get to part 3, Elvin launches into one of the most intense drum solos of his recorded career, with no identifiable meter or consistent tempo. Pursuance in general showcases a lot of Elvin's key vocabulary and influences, which he traces back to one particular listening session. In my first trip to Europe in 1957, I was living in a friend's house in Belgium, and he brought out some tapes that he made in Haiti of an artist there. At that point, the guy had just got out of jail and he was sitting on a street corner drinking rum and playing the conga drum. I thought he was 5 people listening to him. This really intrigued me, so from that point in time, I began to pursue African traditional music. The quest led me to music of African pygmies and of the sub-Saharan Dogon. There's a lot of music happening in the Belgian Congo, and these were tremendous sources of inspiration. When the quartet recorded Pursuance and Psalm, they performed them as one continuous master take. There were no edits, no stitching together, just one unbroken arc of music. And when you have that context and you think that Elvin played this solo just one time, it makes it pretty special. So we've got 5 different pieces of vocabulary we're gonna look at that Elvin uses in this solo. The first one is a triplet lick that moves from the snare to the rack tom to the floor tom. We're just playing triplets, right, left, kick, except you're doubling each note with the hands. The second one is a single stroke lick with 2 kick drums played at the beginning. So we have kick, kick, floor, snare, and then 4 ghost notes following. Number 3 is a 3-note pattern, kick, snare, snare, and you can play that with whatever sticking pattern you want. But the concept that Elvin uses in this solo is he moves between 8th note triplets and 16th notes. Number 4 is another 3-note pattern, snare, tom, kick. And number 5 happens towards the end of the drum solo. We've got 2 3-beat drum fills that Elvin plays. The first one is snare, snare, tom, tom, snare, kick, crash. The second one is just a little bit different. It starts with 1 note on the snare. Snare, tom, tom, snare, snare, kick, crash. Let's try both variations right now. You'll notice that the tempo in the drum solo section is constantly shifting. And on the topic, Elvin once said, "The trend I see taking place in this music is it doesn't have to be one tempo. It's reverting in a sense. That is, there are movements in classical compositions, and it's natural to change the tempo when you get to a new movement. There has not been much of this in jazz, but enough to lead one to wonder why a performance must be in only one tempo, and why a tempo shouldn't change if this enhances the artistic merit of the music." And once we're through Elvin's drum solo, the tune finally kicks in. When McCoy takes over with the piano solo, Elvin really takes a step back. He reduces the amount of comping he's doing, and he really just lets the focus be on the piano. Towards the end of Pursuance, Elvin hands things off to Jimmy Garrison, where he takes an extended bass solo, and that leads us into Psalm. A Love Supreme closes with Psalm, and this one is unlike anything we've covered so far. Instead of a steady pulse or a defined form, Coltrane is literally reading his written poem, the prayer printed in the liner notes, through his saxophone. That makes Elvin's role here completely different, and you can hear this right from the first note where he's playing with mallets on a timpani. The effect is almost like a distant thunder. As Coltrane begins to speak through his saxophone, Elvin shifts into a rubato support.
His drum solos were very expressive, not necessarily in time, but even some of them, when they were in time, some of the 8s took a little long, some of the 8-bar phrases were a little short. You know, they were loose. And as long as everyone in the group was listening and paying attention, it all worked.
He uses rolls that rise and fall with the shape of the sax line, almost like inhaling and exhaling with Coltrane. With Coltrane reaching the final notes, Elvin rises with him. You hear rolling swells on the timpani and cymbals as the intensity reaches its peak. As we get to the end of Psalm, Elvin helps Coltrane bring A Love Supreme to its spiritual conclusion. An ending that would echo far beyond the studio walls, shaping the legacy of jazz and drumming for generations to come. A Love Supreme became one of the most important and acclaimed jazz records of all time. In 2021, it was certified platinum, making it the first jazz album from the 60s to reach over 1 million copies sold in the US. In 2003, it was ranked number 47 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time, and NME ranked it at number 188 on a similar list. For some, this record even became scripture. The St. John Coltrane African Orthodox Church was founded, and this record was their cornerstone.
To this church, Coltrane was the Alpha and the Omega, the Holy Ghost incarnate, and his album A Love Supreme, their holy text.
Love Supreme wasn't about writing compositions that were hard to play and needed a lot of precision. It was more of a spiritual, ecstatic kind of experience that the players themselves were striving to be in, and also transmit that to the audience, to the listener. So if you were in the room with that group, you could be lifted out of your everyday experience. And that really was the concept of that kind of music.
Before Elvin, jazz drumming was often about keeping time, the ride cymbal pattern on top with the snare drum and bass drum comping in between. But after A Love Supreme, the drums were something entirely different, even though people didn't accept it at the time.
I copied all his style, and then I found my own. A drummer's job is to keep the beat, but then if you can be expressive, have a conversation with the singer or the soloist, you can push them. And I witnessed that with Elvin and Coltrane, and I pushed Jim Morrison because of those guys.
It's been amazing to hear how Elvin Jones has inspired some of the best drummers in the world who have come through Drumeo over the last few years.
Elvin Jones is from Pontiac, Michigan, very close to where I grew up. Tiny little kick drum. I don't know how big, like 16, 18? He's a big dude, man, and he's just like destroying these drums in this little jazz club in Hollywood. And this was like, he was in his 70s.
A Love Supreme, I think, is just one of the greatest jazz records ever recorded. That entire record is a beautiful way to hear Elvin in and with this great quartet. What he played is perfect for what that group was doing at that time.
That record blew my mind when I first heard it as an 18-year-old. It really kind of opened my mind to a whole different world of music and, you know, a different style of playing, and everything is there.
Elvin Jones is definitely, arguably, my favorite drummer ever, you know? I mean, Elvin is like the most organic, truthful, honest, you know, musician ever, kind of. I mean, everything he plays is so incredible. His performance on that whole record is just groundbreaking.
I grew up listening to A Love Supreme, and I mean, that's one of his shining moments. I mean, he's a drummer where back in the day, a lot of people did not understand his phrasing, his approach to drumming. He's definitely one of the pioneers of jazz.
Love Supreme I got turned on to by Mark Juliana, actually. And I listened to it. It's the first thing that comes up when I plug my phone into the car.
You know, Elvin's playing is like, there's so much of that African tradition in there, and so much of it can't even be transcribed because it transcends musical notation. So I remember listening to that record in college, and it was definitely a turn the lights out kind of a thing.
And the way that Elvin plays drums, it always reminded me of you know, a piano player, or it's super melodic. His drumming in the jazz world created so many shockwaves because it was so powerful, and his presence was so enormous on stage.
He came up with a way of playing that allowed the other players to be freer. In a way, he exposed the fabric of the swing beat in a very organic, in some ways African type way, where you can really hear the polyrhythmic nature of the swing pulse.
I am a fan, and it's really, really cool. I've probably been influenced by people that were influenced by him, if you know what I mean, because undoubtedly he's a giant.
It's just nobody ever sounded like that guy. I mean, he even says in interviews that he had a hard time getting work at first because people didn't understand what he was playing, you know. But he stuck to his guns, and usually, a lot of times, the greatest, you know, artists people don't understand at first, you know, and man, what a treasure.
The way he thinks of composition was like ahead of its time. Like a lot of people didn't want to play with Elvin. They thought he was too out, you know. It's just like where I need to know where the one is, or he played over the bars and like. But he saw the whole picture. Like he's a really incredibly developed musician, and so when he found Coltrane, it was like, okay, these guys speak the same language. That record, one of the greatest jazz records of all time. Yeah.
And reflecting on the A Love Supreme session, Elvin once said, "In one sense, it seemed that we played for an hour, and in another sense, it seemed as if it were 2 or 3 minutes. Even when I listen to it now, I lose the sense of passage of time. I'm completely submerged in the music." Well, there you have it, the genius of A Love Supreme. It was one of the most important pieces of music that Elvin recorded with the Coltrane Quartet, and to this day, it's still inspiring drummers around the world over 60 years later. I remember hearing this record for the very first time, and immediately I wanted to figure out what those Latin grooves were that he was playing in Acknowledgement. It was mind-blowing to hear how he could play all of those different rhythms all at the same time. And then, of course, there was his swing playing on Resolution, the Pursuance drum solo, which was insane. There were so many different aspects of this record that were interesting, and to this day, Elvin's still one of the drummers who's influenced me more than anyone else. Now, before you go, make sure you leave a comment below and let me know one thing you've learned from listening to Elvin Jones and the A Love Supreme record. And also stay tuned for the next episode in the Genius Of series, where we're going to take a little bit of a turn and we're going to check out some Motorhead. We're going to dive into Phil Taylor's drumming on the song Ace of Spades. Lastly, if you want to learn how to play these Elvin Jones grooves on the kit, you can check out the full breakdown we filmed for our Musora students. The link is down in the description. You can check out that video for free, along with tons of other breakdowns we've done for the Genius Of series. With that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.